The morning started with sunshine, but even the sunlight seemed afraid to touch the Monroe mansion. Something was building, something unseen but heavy, like thunder before a storm. The staff could feel it too. They moved quietly, their eyes lowered, whispering to each other in the kitchen. Everyone in that house knew, when Mr. and Mrs. Monroe were both home, peace never lasted long. Amara woke early, as always. She polished the silverware, prepared the breakfast table, and tried to keep her heart calm. But deep inside, a strange uneasiness stirred in her chest. She didn't know why, but she felt that today was going to change everything. By 8 o'clock, the mansion was awake. The long dining table gleamed under soft golden light. Plates of pancakes, strawberries, eggs, and juice were neatly placed. Fresh flowers filled the air with a delicate scent. It looked like the perfect family breakfast. But perfection was a mask, and that mask was about to crack wide open. Richard Monroe walked in first, wearing his crisp grey suit. He looked tired, as usual. His phone was in one hand, his briefcase in the other. Clara followed soon after, dressed elegantly in white silk, her face flawless, her perfume thick in the air. Neither looked at the other. They sat down opposite each other, separated not just by the table, but by years of silence, pride, and pain. Ethan came in quietly, holding his sketchbook close to his chest. He took his seat between them, hoping, just hoping, that maybe today things would be different. At first, the only sound was the clinking of cutlery. Then Clara spoke, her voice cold. "So, are you leaving for work already?" Richard didn't look up. "I have a meeting at 9. Clara scoffed. "Of course you do. Always a meeting." He sighed. "You know my schedule, Clara." "I used to," she said sharply, "before your company became more important than your family." Richard finally looked up. "Don't start." Ethan's hand froze mid-bite. He lowered his fork. He'd seen this scene before, too many times. Clara's voice rose. "You think I enjoy nagging? You think I want to fight every morning? You leave before sunrise and come home after midnight? You don't even ask how your son's doing." "I provide for this family," Richard snapped. "Everything you see around you, this house, these clothes, that car, it's all because of me." Amara, standing near the doorway with a tray, closed her eyes. She wanted to disappear, but she couldn't. "You think money makes you a father?" Clara's voice cracked. "Ethan doesn't need a millionaire. He needs a dad." Richard's temper flared. "And maybe if you weren't so obsessed with appearances, we'd still be a family worth coming home to." The air thickened. The words became weapons. Every sentence cut deeper than the last. Ethan's breathing quickened. He stared at his plate, wishing he could vanish. Amara's hands trembled. She wanted to stop them, but this wasn't her place. She was just a maid, a servant, invisible. But then, Clara's anger turned toward Ethan. "Look at him," she said bitterly. "You've made him just like you. Quiet, cold, emotionless." Ethan flinched. "Mom, please, don't interrupt me," Clara shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The glass of orange juice spilled over, splashing onto his sketchbook. His drawings, his little world of peace, blurred under the liquid gold. Ethan stared at it in horror. Then tears filled his eyes. "You ruined it," he whispered. Clara blinked, startled by his tone. "Ethan, I—" But before she could finish, he pushed back his chair and ran upstairs. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the house. Then, his bedroom door slammed shut. The silence that followed was unbearable. Richard rose from his chair, fury written all over his face. "Are you happy now, Clara?" he said in a low voice. "You just crushed the one good thing left in this house." Clara shot back, "Don't blame me. You're the reason we've become strangers." Their voices grew louder again, raw, painful, and ugly. Amara stood frozen in the corner. Her chest heaved, tears filling her eyes. She had seen broken families before, but this one was destroying itself in slow motion. And suddenly, something inside her snapped. The fear that had kept her silent vanished. The respect that chained her voice dissolved. She couldn't watch this anymore. "Stop it!" she cried, stepping forward. The shout was so unexpected, so powerful, that both Clara and Richard turned toward her in shock. Amara's eyes burned with tears, but her voice didn't shake. "Do you even hear yourselves?" she said, stepping closer. "You're tearing each other apart while your son cries upstairs." Clara glared at her, stunned. "You're out of line, Amara." But Amara didn't stop. "No, Mum. I've been quiet long enough. Every day I watch you destroy everything people dream to have. You think this house makes you rich? You think your clothes make you powerful? You're poor, both of you, because you've forgotten what love means." Richard stared, speechless. Clara's face twisted with disbelief. "How dare you?" Clara hissed. "You're just a maid. You have no right to speak to me that way." And then, it happened. Without planning it, without even realizing what her body was doing, Amara raised her hand and slapped Clara Munro across the face. The sound echoed like thunder in the still room. The tray in Amara's hand clattered to the floor. A spoon rolled away, spinning in the silence. Everyone froze. Clara touched her cheek, stunned. Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from shock. Amara's breath came heavy, but her voice was steady. "That's not for disrespect," she said quietly. "That's for forgetting who you are." She took a step back, trembling but unbroken. "You're a wife, a mother, a woman who once had love so big it could fill this house, but now you're lost behind walls of pride, and he—" She turned to Richard, her eyes sharp with truth. "You're no better. You think working day and night makes you a man? A family doesn't need a provider. It needs a presence." Richard's lips parted, but no words came. "You're both watching your child drown in loneliness," Amara continued, her voice shaking now. "And the saddest part is, you don't even see it." Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't speaking as a maid anymore. She was speaking as someone who had seen too much pain in her life to stay silent another second. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, his small face wet with tears. He had heard everything. He looked down at his parents, then at Amara, and whispered, "Please, stop fighting." The three of them stood frozen, their hearts cracked open, the truth raw in the air. And that was the moment everything changed. Clara sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Her anger was gone. In its place was shame, deep, painful shame. She looked up at Amara, her voice breaking. "Why did you do that?" Amara wiped her tears. "Because love sometimes needs a wake-up call, ma'am. And you were all asleep." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of realization. Richard finally sat down too, rubbing his face with his hands. His voice was low, tired, honest. "Maybe she's right, Clara. Maybe we've been asleep for too long." Ethan came down slowly, hugging his mother tightly. Clara broke into tears, holding him close, whispering, "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Amara watched, her heart heavy but hopeful. The storm had hit, yes, but maybe it had also cleared the sky. The slap that everyone thought would end her job had just saved an entire family. The house was silent after the storm. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the faint ticking of the golden wall clock echoed through the mansion. Tick, tock, tick, as if counting the seconds since Amara's hand had struck across Clara Monroe's face. The slap wasn't out of hatred. It wasn't out of rebellion. It was a desperate cry from the heart, the kind of act that comes when love for truth is stronger than fear of consequence. Amara stood frozen, tears glistening in her eyes, unsure if she had just saved her job or destroyed her life. Clara sat in stunned silence, one hand still touching her cheek. Richard stood beside the table, eyes wide, as though he had just seen his reflection for the first time in years. And Ethan. He stood on the stairs, staring down at the three adults who had built his world, a world that for the first time was cracking open to let the light in. "Amara," Clara whispered finally, her voice trembling. "You hit me." Amara nodded slowly, her voice heavy with guilt. "Yes, Mom, and I will accept whatever punishment you decide. But please," her eyes filled again, "please don't close your heart before hearing why." Clara blinked. "Why?" "Because you're drowning, Ma'am," Amara said softly. "You've been hurting so long you forgot what peace feels like. You think yelling and blaming will ease the pain, but it only feeds it." Richard looked down, guilt burning through him. "And you, sir," Amara continued, her voice breaking, "you think working harder will fix it all. But a house isn't a home if love doesn't live in it. Your son doesn't need another business deal. He needs his father's arms." Richard swallowed hard, eyes glistening. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his board members, not his wife, not even his own conscience. The silence that followed was long and thick. Then Clara finally said something no one expected. "You're right," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, like a glass about to shatter. "You're right, Amara. I've been so angry, so lost. I thought control was the only way to survive. But all I've done is push away the people who loved me." She turned toward Ethan, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's so sorry." Ethan ran to her, throwing his small arms around her waist. Clara clutched him tightly, crying into his hair. Richard's jaw tightened. He turned away for a moment, then slowly walked toward them. He knelt beside his wife and son, something he hadn't done in years. "Clara," he said softly, "I'm sorry too. I should have been here more. I was chasing success while watching our family fall apart." She looked at him, eyes full of years of pain. "Do you still love me, Richard?" He reached for her hand. "I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it." It was as if the slap had shaken the dust off their hearts. For the first time in a long time, they were seeing each other. Not as enemies, not as disappointments, but as broken souls trying to find their way back home. Amara stood back, silently crying. She hadn't meant to become part of their story, but now she had, in the most unexpected way. Clara looked up at her, still holding Ethan. "Amara, come here." Amara hesitated, unsure if this was an order or an invitation. But Clara's expression softened, warm and full of gratitude. When Amara stepped closer, Clara took her hand. "Thank you," she said through her tears. "You reminded me who I am. I don't know if I deserved that mercy after everything I've done, but thank you." Amara's voice trembled. "You don't need to thank me, Mom. I just couldn't stand by and watch love die in front of me." Nodded slowly. "No one's ever spoken to us like that, Amara. Everyone treats us like we're made of gold, but gold rusts on the inside too." Ethan looked up at her with innocent eyes. "Amara, does this mean we're okay now?" She smiled gently. "It means the storm has passed, Ethan. But after a storm, you have to rebuild. Together." The rest of the day moved differently. The mansion, once filled with tension and icy silence, now felt alive. Fragile, yes, but alive. Clara made lunch herself for the first time in years. She called Amara into the kitchen, not to order her around, but to learn from her. Together, they cooked a simple meal: pasta, salad, and fresh juice. When Ethan ran in, laughing and chasing the family cat, Clara laughed too, a sound no one had heard in so long. It almost startled them all. Richard came home early from work, leaving his meetings behind. He carried a box of old family photos. That night, they sat in the living room, flipping through memories. Their wedding day, Ethan's first birthday, holidays long forgotten. Each picture carried both pain and beauty, but for the first time, they could look at them without bitterness. Amara watched quietly from the hallway. Her heart swelled with quiet joy. This was what she had prayed for, even if she never dared to believe it could happen. Later that night, Clara came to find Amara in the staff quarters. Amara quickly stood up. "Ma'am, do you need something?" Clara shook her head. "No. I came to apologize." Amara looked shocked. "Apologize?" "Yes," Clara said softly. "I treated you terribly. I spoke to you like you weren't human, and yet you were the one who showed me what humanity really means." She took Amara's hands gently. "You didn't slap me to hurt me. You did it to wake me up. And it worked." Tears streamed down both their faces. Clara continued, "You don't work for me anymore, Amara. You work with me. From now on, you're family." Amara shook her head, overwhelmed. "Mom, I don't know what to say." Clara smiled. "Just promise me one thing. Never stop speaking truth, even when it's hard to hear." Amara nodded slowly. "I promise." Days passed, and the change was real. Richard began having breakfast at home every morning. He drove Ethan to school and even joined him for his art exhibition at the community centre. Clara started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping others rediscover the love she had almost lost. And Amara? She became more than a maid. She became the heart of the house. Whenever someone argued or forgot what mattered, Ethan would whisper, "Remember the slap." And they would all laugh, not out of mockery, but out of gratitude. Because that one act of courage, born from love, had saved them all. One evening, as the sun set behind the mansion, Clara and Richard stood on the balcony with Amara beside them. Clara looked at the horizon and said softly, "You know, Amara, that day you slapped me, I thought it was the worst moment of my life." Amara smiled faintly. "And now?" Clara's eyes glowed with peace. "Now I realize it was the moment my life began again." Amara looked out at the fading light, her heart full. "Sometimes, ma'am, love has to hurt before it heals." Richard put an arm around his wife, pulling her close. Ethan ran out laughing, holding a paper airplane in his hand. The family stood together, no longer broken, no longer cold. The slap that once shocked the house had become a symbol of awakening, a reminder that even the deepest cracks can let the light in. And for the first time in years, the Monroe mansion wasn't just a house. It was home. Weeks turned into months, and the Monroe mansion was no longer the same house it once was. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled. The rooms were still grand and filled with luxury. But what had changed was invisible: the feeling. Where cold silence once ruled, now warmth and laughter lived again.
It was as if that one thunderous slap had shaken not just Clara Munro, but the very walls of the mansion, breaking loose years of pride, resentment, and loneliness. Every morning, the house awakened with soft music and the smell of pancakes. Clara no longer shouted for her breakfast to be ready. She helped make it. Sometimes she would even hum, something Amara had never heard her do before. "Good morning, sunshine," Clara would say to Ethan, kissing his forehead. He would smile, a smile that glowed brighter than the chandeliers. "Good morning, Mum. Can we pack lunch together today?" Richard, once always buried in phone calls, now joined them at the table, his phone face down beside his plate. One morning he chuckled and said, "I cancelled my early meeting. I'd rather have breakfast with my family." Amara, setting down the juice, smiled quietly. It was a simple scene, but to her it was a miracle. Because this wasn't just breakfast. It was healing served on a plate. Amara's life, too, had changed in ways she never imagined. She still cleaned, cooked, and cared for the family. But now she did it with love, not fear. The Munros no longer treated her like a servant, but as someone who belonged, a pillar of their new life. One evening, Clara handed Amara an envelope. "What's this?" Amara asked. Clara smiled. "A scholarship. You once told me you stopped your education to work. I want you to finish what you started." Amara's hands trembled. "Mom, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Clara said gently. "Because you gave us back something money could never buy. Our family. Let us give something back to you." Tears filled Amara's eyes. For the first time in her life she felt seen, not as the maid, but as a woman with dreams, with worth, with a name that mattered. Ethan grew brighter by the day. His laughter echoed through the halls. He started painting again, his new artwork full of colour, hope, and light. One Sunday afternoon, he ran to Amara holding a drawing. "Look," he said excitedly. It was a drawing of 4 people, a man, a woman, a little boy, and a woman with dark skin and a kind smile. Above them, he had written, "My family." Amara's heart melted. "You put me in your family picture, Ethan?" He nodded, grinning. "Of course. You're the reason my family loves again." She hugged him tight, trying not to cry. That picture would stay in her room forever. A reminder that love isn't about blood. It's about hearts that choose each other. News of what happened in the Munro mansion slowly spread through whispers in the town. At first, people gossiped. "Did you hear? The billionaire's maid slapped his wife." But when the truth came out, when they saw the Munros walking together, smiling, supporting charity causes, the story changed. It became a legend. A story about a maid's courage, a family's redemption, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. One day, a local journalist came to interview Clara and Richard. "What really happened that day?" she asked softly. Clara looked at Amara, who stood beside her. "That day," she said, "someone reminded me that love without humility isn't love at all. She woke me up." The journalist nodded, moved. "So, the rumours are true?" Clara smiled faintly. "Yes, the maid did slap me, and I thank God she did." That line made headlines everywhere, the slap that saved a family. It's about facing the ghosts that hide inside you. One quiet evening, Clara asked Amara to join her on the garden bench. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. "Amara," Clara began, "when you slapped me, I hated you for a second. I wanted to fire you on the spot." Amara lowered her eyes. "I know, Mom." "But then," Clara continued, "I looked into your eyes and saw something I hadn't seen in my own reflection for years. Truth, pain, courage. That slap wasn't about anger. It was about love. It was the first honest thing anyone had done for me in a long time. Amara's voice broke. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just couldn't let you keep hurting yourself and your family. Clara reached out and held her hand. You saved me, Amara. You saved us all. And right there, under the fading sun, two women, one rich, one poor, one white, one black, sat together not as employer and servant, but as equals, as friends. The Monroe mansion became a symbol of second chances. Clara started a charity called Awaken Hearts, focused on helping struggling families reconnect through counseling and compassion. Richard began mentoring young fathers, teaching them that being present matters more than being perfect. Amara, now studying part-time, worked with both of them to help families find peace before pride destroyed them. During the Foundation's first event, Clara spoke before a large crowd. She looked across the audience, her voice steady but full of emotion. Months ago, she said, I was a woman lost in my own anger. I thought wealth and control were strength, but a woman who worked in my home showed me something greater, the courage to love through truth. Sometimes, the hardest truth is the only thing that can set you free. Then she looked at Amara, standing proudly in the front row, and said, This foundation exists because one brave woman dared to care enough to wake me up. The crowd erupted in applause. Amara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She had come into this house as a maid, but she had become something far more powerful. A mirror that showed love its way home. Months later, one quiet evening, Amara sat alone in the backyard under the stars. Ethan came out and sat beside her. Amara, he said softly, do you think people change? She smiled. I think people remember who they are. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them. He leaned his head on her arm. You reminded us. Amara looked at the stars, bright, endless, eternal. Maybe that's what we're all here to do, Ethan, she whispered. To remind each other that love is stronger than pride. From inside the house, she could hear Clara and Richard laughing together, the sound of music floating through the open windows. And for the first time in a long time, Amara felt at peace. She closed her eyes and smiled. Because the slap that once seemed unforgivable had become unforgettable, a symbol of courage, truth, and love, reborn. Sometimes life doesn't whisper, it shouts. Sometimes love doesn't comfort, it confronts. And sometimes the one act you regret the most becomes the miracle that saves you. The slap didn't break the Monroe family. It woke them up. And maybe, just maybe, that's what love is really meant to do.